Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Line Change. My name is Michael Leboff, and joining me today is my co-host Nick Martin, Tim Kalinowski. I don't know if he took a vacation or something, but uh, we'll have to let him know that the NHL season extends beyond the Super Bowl, and hopefully we'll have him back on for Wednesday's show and Thursday's show and beyond. But I can make no guarantees. What I can guarantee is we'll serve you up a pair of underdogs to start this show, a Tuesday night with right around what, like 8 games. We had a bunch on Monday for the President's Day plus Family Day in Canada. Happy Family Day, Nick. And then we have a bit of a disjointed schedule, but still, I think Tuesday night's somewhat watered down schedule has a lot of good betting angles. And I want to start with my favorite underdog, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Once again, they feature in this section quite a bit. They're better than 2-1 plus 210 at the time of recording in Los Angeles to take on the Kings. Los Angeles is minus 260, a total here of 6.5. The Kings coming back after I don't know what you would call it, just one of the strangest road trips. Results all over the place. The win against the Devils followed up that crazy loss against the Sabres, but all this culminates in them coming home, taking on the Jackets. And I just don't trust Los Angeles at this kind of price right now with the goaltending and how they've showed. And you know that Columbus should be, a pesky bunch. We say it all the time, like they don't get the results, but they do put forth the effort. So I think at this kind of price, the Black Jackets, the Blue Jackets are pretty good, a pretty good value here.
Yeah, I agree. And, the Kings rattled off some really good, well played wins after that horrific Buffalo performance where we said we were done with them and all those things. But I do think it's a good time to kind of go back to, it's such a back and forth league, and you do see a give and a take. And like you said, I think some of the flaws with the Kings are still there with the goaltending. So I still think the Kings are a really good team. I think they're turning the corner. But I like this take, and I do think one way, if you want to like try to have fun with it too, the Blue Jackets to win the game and the game to go over 6.5 is plus 550 at the time of recording. I think that's another fun way to kind of sprinkle on this if you're going to hope for maybe one of these letdown Kings performances or their goalie falls apart. That's a decent angle. And I think the offensive upside's there for the Blue Jackets still. Defensively, it's a train wreck. I thought their San Jose game was kind of just what it was. I think that's going to be a lot of what the Blue Jackets are the rest of the way. Um, maybe a little more scoring talent than people expect, I think, but they're definitely going to give some stuff up at the other end. So I think that'd be kind of a fun way to target this one.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
and then
like
I'm gonna, oh, sorry.
real quick before we get to yours, I just want to like go deeper, a little deeper into that schedule spot. It's brutal for the Kings, I think. Like, so they do a 4 game road trip coming out. So they played Edmonton at home right after the All-Star break. Then they go on a 4 game swing through Buffalo, New Jersey, Boston, and Pittsburgh. The Boston and Pittsburgh games were back to backs. So they travel from Boston to Pittsburgh. Then they get one day off flying across the country to play the Blue Jackets, who'll be waiting for them. So I think that, yeah, it's just a classic great schedule spot for a Blue Jackets team that is making its way through the 3 leg California swing. So there's, I think, a lot of kind of off the ice stuff pointing to a good effort from Columbus here.
Yeah, I agree. And I do like the spot for sure. And then my underdog of the night, I'm going to go with the Canucks over the Avalanche. They're plus 132 at the time of recording after immediately after a 10-7 loss versus the Wild, what was one of the most ridiculous games I've ever seen. I mean, what can you even say about that? But they did save Demko through that entire game, which I think was the plan. I took the Canucks and I kind of knowing that they'd go D Smith and still a disaster. But this kind of for me is just one of those things. I still think the Avs are kind of susceptible to deeper teams. I think that the Canucks are going to own their share of the play in this game. Their underlying process has improved a little bit the rest of the way. I still think the Avs have been a lot of the same. They look pretty competitive in like versus teams where their top guns can just roll and dominate minutes, and the other minutes they can kind of survive. And that's kind of been pretty consistent here. I thought they were pretty good versus the Lightning when we picked them and they lost. But that whole trip when they played elite teams, you could kind of just see that this team isn't entirely well rounded. And I actually thought some of their flaws still showed versus the Coyotes in what was a really favorable game script for the Avs. They got all the breaks in that game. They got all the goal reviews that were really marginal. I thought the penalty, the reffing, I thought was really bad. I thought everything broke the Avs' way, but that kind of helps hide what I think is not the most dominant roster going right now. So yeah, obviously they deserve to be a favorite over the Canucks right now in who are in a back-to-back traveling into Colorado, but not minus 160. I think that's a little too long. That with Demko and net, the Canucks are very live to this number. And especially when you talk about their scoring talent and Demko's upside, like they can own a little less of the play here and still win. But even then, I'm not even entirely convinced that'll be the case because I think they do have some advantages down the lineup. So, yeah, give me the Canucks for my underdog on Tuesday's slate.
Yep. I like that one as well. And you touched on it. It's like it's a depth thing more than anything. And I think you get a decent number here because of a tricky schedule spot for Vancouver. So that is going to put some air in the number. So Vancouver and Columbus are our favorite underdogs off the top of the show. Let's go to the big board. The Dallas Stars will travel to Manhattan. They played today in Boston, lost in a shootout. The Stars are plus 114 at the time of recording, Rangers minus 137. This total sitting at 6.5. I like Dallas here for a few reasons. First of all, I think that this price gets better because we saw Oettinger against Boston. So when Wedgwood gets confirmed, as something you like to always point out is, this number should, even though we know Oettinger is not going to play, once the confirmation comes, usually some money does come in, or bookmakers react to the the fact that they think money's going to come in when a backup gets announced. I also think we'll probably see Jonathan Quick here. I know he's been great this season, but I still want to try to take him on in spots like this. Even if it's Shesterkin, I don't want to judge a goalie off of an outdoor game performance, but still wobbly, but more closer to wobbly than elite, as he has been for the past 2 seasons. Um, so I think that you're going to get a good number here on one of the better teams in the league because of the back-to-back spot. Additionally, like the Rangers they've won what, 7 on the spin. They just won a crazy game against the Islanders that I don't want to talk about ever again, don't want to think about ever again. And but that's been their MO even during this winning streak, is like they're just clinical. You make a mistake and they'll just like sit around and wait in games. Don't care if they're down 2 goals into the third period. They start games slowly. And I think you can get away with a lot with that. The Rangers specifically can get away with that because of their power play and their elite skill and playmakers and all that. But it gets a little harder to do that against a team like Dallas, who's you'd imagine will be doing the same thing, right? They should be able to. They score more than anybody in the league. So um, at 5-on-5, I like the Stars' chances here. They should be able to play with the Rangers on special teams as well. The goaltending with Wedgwood and goal, it's a bit of a concern, but given where I think this number heads, like I'll be looking for a plus 120 on Dallas, hoping I get it. I want to try to beat the Rangers here with the way that they're winning, despite still not doing all that much that makes you think that they aren't playing like a team that's been on a 7-game winning streak. Credit to them, but I think that that's fair to say.
Yeah, I agree. I think the time to fade them is coming. It hasn't been the most convincing winning streak at all. And yeah, eventually you're not going to be able to win games with this kind of process. I definitely still rate the Stars better too. So no argument from me. I think the Stars are a better team. I don't hate the over either. Like it seems a little 6.5, pretty high for Stars Rangers, but I still almost want to just jump in now because I feel like it still might go up a bit once Wedgwood's in. So I don't mind that. And yeah, I think the Stars do have the offensive firepower to win some of these matchups. Like you look at what the Rangers are doing, and it does. It feels like there's flaws you can point out, and then they find a way. But eventually, the way they've won games recently doesn't seem like it'll continue. 7-game streak doesn't feel like everything's all that right. Even if you look at like some of the Rangers fans' tweets from the middle of that game yesterday, and it's one game, I get it. But you listen to all the complaints about what's going on with the team and this player and that player and this line, and it's like you can feel how it doesn't feel like it's been a 7-game win streak. And they have had some soft wins and good spots over some of these teams during that time.
Yeah. All right. I'll do my best to get over that. But we got to talk about the Islanders. They are plus 122 in Pittsburgh. I mean, the Penguins and Islanders are in the same boat here, just coughing up points. The Penguins were at 1-0 on Jaromir Jagr night, deep into that game against the Los Angeles Kings, and lose it in regulation just hours after the Islanders did what they did against the Rangers. So, who knows with this team. Um, yep, so Pittsburgh's laying minus 146. The total here is 5.5. I think it's going to end up closing at 6, just the way it looks. Um, the Islanders, once again, Patrick Waugh after the game said that thought that game as a coach, he's like, I'm not a player, I'm a coach. I'm not. He thought that was a positive game. He thought the Islanders played well at 5-on-5. I thought they did too. They just, once again, they have so many mistakes in them that it's really hard to trust them. I will read through a host of games in which they've blown third period leads this season. 2-0 lead against Detroit, 3-1 lead against Carolina, 3-2 lead against Vancouver, 3-2 lead against Seattle, 3-2 lead against Calgary. Those 3 games all came in a row. They also blew a 4-3 lead in Calgary at that same game. They blew 2 leads in Carolina. They ended up winning that game, but that 2 third periods blown before they won. They blew a 4-2 lead in New Jersey. They blew a 4-1 lead at home against the Sharks. 2 different 1-goal leads in the third against the Boston Bruins. 1-0 lead at Nashville. Lost that one in regulation. A 4-3 lead at Colorado. And now this 5-3 lead against the Rangers. I worked it out. The Islanders blow a third period lead once every 4.5 games this season on average. So they're doing something that's just gonna kill me. Their penalty kill is clipping at a historically bad rate. They're only 4 points out at the time of recording of the playoffs, so they're playing so unbelievably annoyingly but well enough to keep me invested, and it's killing me. Just do one or the other. Anyways, any bets here?
Yeah, I'm going back to the tie. I think no need to go off it here. I like the spot. I think it's one of those ones, same kind of thing. It was funny because my tie handicap on the Winter Class or on the Stadium Series, whatever the NHL is calling it these days, I mean, it was lucky, right? Obviously, it was a little lucky, but that's the whole point. I think I put in my write-up specifically, Mike, I said the Islanders are good enough to get leads and get ahead in these games. They're not good enough to put games away. And then I also do think it's in their head a little bit too.
Yeah,
You look at the Penguins, though, it's the exact same
yeah,
story. You could probably listed the same 10 games of
yeah.
points they should have collected this year. And it is such a huge spot. So I do feel like that lends itself to closer score lines a lot of the time when you get both teams kind of ready for it. And the Pens have played a ton of close hockey themselves. They've both gone to overtime a lot. So plus 350 for me, I think is a good price. It's a fun sprinkle. It's one of my favorite bets. So I like that. I'll put a small call to action to our viewers too if you want to rate and subscribe. I don't always do this, but we would appreciate it. I think it's been a bit of a tough weekend for Mike. He's finding his way onto this show after what would be a TD breaking loss for me if I watched the Caps lose in that fashion. I also thought I had a really good weekend personally of picks. Didn't get much support, but got someone who hacked into my PayPal 2 nights in a row. So if there's one thing we can ask of, it's if you can like and subscribe. We do always really appreciate that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that is true. It will also make our podcast producers happy that we did that because I always forget to. It's a good spot for it. One other note I just want to make about the Islanders: they have a minus 23 goal difference this season, but they have 14 overtime losses. So, like, I know that they've got 4 or 5 overtime wins as well. So that goal differential looks so weird on the NHL page, but it's not as bad as that. So there are like a million different conflicting, contradicting signals about this team. It's driving me up a wall, and I just want the season to end.
It's funny
Anyway,
to Oh, I
go
was just
on.
gonna say
No,
it's funny to think about. You always hear commentators say, like teams don't practice 3-on-3 this much, and they don't practice 6-on-5 that much. You could argue that Isles could just do numerous practices in a row, film whatever they need on just 3-on-3 and 6-on-5, and it would be the ultimate game changer for their
could
record this year.
still have no empty net goals scored. I think they're out now with the Rangers scoring two. I think they're now outscored 11-0 this season when the empty nets. So, anyways, cheery note. So Nick likes to tie there. I can't find any fault with that. Okay, on that note, we'll move on to the Senators and Panthers. Ottawa in Florida to play the red hot Panthers. Florida's laying minus 220, total of 6.5. I think this is Ottawa's a good spot for Ottawa. Still, even on the back to back, I think this number gets bigger. It's just a sell high spot, simple as that. We'll see what happens in Tampa with the Senators. I think we can probably throw that caveat in there that you might want to wait because I could see a pretty flat effort after they just had their season ended for like the 18th time with those back-to-back losses against two teams that if they had won, they could start. I mean, it was Chicago and Anaheim. They could have started to build some momentum and done their classic Senators. We're still in this kind of thing, but that's now all out the door. Our futures on them to win, to have the most points in February. Well, they ended in really, I mean, the Rangers haven't lost a game in February, and that doesn't help either. But um, I think that this price, even if they lose in Tampa, could get to a point where it's just an automatic play on a team that's still dangerous. Like you look at the paper, the on talent, the on paper talent of Ottawa, you look at their numbers, everything points to them being they should be better. So it comes down to the goaltending, and I think that you're going to catch a great number because Florida's just been rolling. So this is a sell high spot, not one I'm excited. Definitely not my favorite bet on the board, but I would likely play Ottawa here.
Yeah, I don't mind the Sens. Just really love the way the Panthers are playing. So it feels like a bit of a reach for me narrative wise. But I really like, and we'll go into this a little bit more on the best bets. But I think the over 6.5 it's at minus 122 at the time recording. I would play 6.5 to minus 140. I was really surprised to see that number out there. I think you look at Ottawa's strengths, still such a deep offense. They let down offensively versus the Ducks and the Blue Jackets, but those are still going to be much more the outliers in terms of their games, I think. I really like what they've been doing offensively. I love the talent that's there. I mean, if you look at the way they can configure the top nine, still a really good power play unit. So even against Florida, I think they can get theirs offensively, especially in a game where they might kind of be forced to chase it a little bit. And then you look at the other end of the spectrum, and Florida's just playing at such a high level, and they play at a fast pace. And for me, this just looks like one where there's so many avenues where it can break open. And I think if you want to look for even like some over 8.5 to mix in, I don't mind that. I think there's a good chance that this one can really just break open. So I like the over. I think they will get to 7, but we'll see because every book's at 6.5 right now. So I'm a little surprised because I thought this would kind of be, if anything, like we've seen a lot of sevens from the Senators lately. I don't really see how this one isn't more like shouldn't deserve that. Like for example, tonight they're at 7 versus the Lightning. I don't really see much difference in this other than I guess the Lightning are a worse defensive team than Florida, but I think it should be priced roughly the same as that. So yeah, I definitely like the over in this one.
It also should be noted that the last time I mean, these are not disciplined teams, right? The Panthers take a ton of penalties, the Senators take a ton of penalties. And was it the last time they played? It was just a complete circus.
That's true. The last game in Florida, right, was a
Right.
complete gong show. I do think there is something to that.
Yeah.
These are two teams that absolutely just love to mess around after the whistles and stuff. And, I think the Canucks obviously get everyone up for it too. So,
Yep.
yeah, I think it should be a fun high event game.
We'll move on to York Washington Capitals against the New Jersey Devils. Devils are minus 170 on the road, Caps plus 140 total here of 6.5. The Devils have started to, um, I guess you could say they started to make their move a bit with a few wins. They did drop a game to the Kings in the midst of this like 4 game stretch, but the win against the Flyers looked impressive outdoors. Everything seems to be pointing in the right direction in terms of like their 5-on-5 play, and I think that Jack Hughes being healthy obviously has a lot to do with that. Most importantly, it comes down to the goaltending, and Nico Daws has been really solid for them. I think he's more of a band-aid than a fix for the rest of the season, but while he's hot, you keep riding him. You like the Devils here. I'm just not going to get to it because of the goaltending, which still scares me a bit, but um, I do think that you'll make a pretty solid argument that they'll just own the puck enough and create enough offense that the goaltending kind of becomes a secondary concern.
Yeah, I mean, Nico Dawes isn't going to play at this level all season long, but it also shows what the Devils are capable of with even break-even goaltending. He's been unreal the last 4 games, and over the season, he now, I think his save percentage up to 910 after the outdoor game. So he's been pretty good the whole time. I think they just have to ride him. It's up to 912 now. So yeah, you definitely want to stick it out with him. I don't know if the numbers will hold around minus 170, which is right where I thought I'd cut off here. The bet that I more expect people to have tomorrow morning available would be I think Kemper over 28.5 saves is going to be a good look. I like the way this sets up for the Devils. They're starting to really own the puck at 5-on-5. You mentioned the Jack Hughes thing. I think that is obviously a big part of it. Nemec is playing really, really well on the back end. The other factor that I think's really gotten or really turning the tides for them is how good Heischer's line's been going, and Meyer in particular has found his game lately up there. And I mean, also Palat wasn't even in the lineup for a ton of the season, so you can see how that is a huge add compared to what they've had because Meyer has either been not in the lineup or not doing anything, and Flat's just not been in the lineup. So basically, a whole new top look there. And then Hughes is obviously carrying the other line. So starting to look pretty formidable again. I think they can really roll the Caps here. And the other note, too, for the Caps, I think the Fehervari absence is more crucial than like any probably non-Caps fans would realize. I think he's been their best defensive defender this year. So that's not great either. So yeah, I think they'll be in tough. If they do win, I feel like it'll be one of those things where the Devils kind of fall apart and the Caps are kind of clinical on their chances at the other end as they just try to, kind of turn the tides and go the other way.
All right, on to the Jets and Wild. Minnesota is a plus 136 underdog in Winnipeg, minus 164 for the Jets, a total of 5.5 here. Both of these teams will be playing the second day in a row. As Nick mentioned, the Wild just played an insane game against the Canucks that ended 10-7. It was a Big Ten game. The Jets and Flames are in the middle of playing a pretty wild game themselves. It's 3-3 in the second period, and Sean Monahan has a hat trick in his return to Calgary, his first game in Calgary as a Jet, I should say. But so we're gonna see Brossoit, and I don't really know who for the Wild since they played both. We'll find out tomorrow. Nonetheless, I still like the Wild at this kind of price. I don't think it's gonna hang around. Unfortunately, I wouldn't really play it below plus 130. We've talked about this with the Jets for a while. Like they're a solid team. They'll grind you out. They'll grind to results. They'll kind of like long term over an 82 game season. Like you'd expect them to win more than they'll lose just in a considerable amount because of their goaltending and their kind of structure, attention to detail. But putting teams away or getting separation is not going to come easy to them, and that's what you're looking for out of a favorite at this price. So we'll see. Plus 130, I think, is fine on Minnesota or better. But another one that I have a couple other bets I like more than this one on the Wild.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, but I think still 5.5. I like a bet if you can get uh, better than minus 135 on that. I think my expectation is it ends up being Flurry because of chances are I think that was the plan going into the back-to-back, right? So the goalies might have already known. And then also Gustafson was the one who really got lit up and like had the damage going against him. So I feel like if that was your plan, you're probably not reaching to be like, all right,
Yep.
we're not going to give Flurry his chance when like Gustafson
Mhm.
just kind of blew his. So I'd expect him. I mean, really, they've actually been pretty comparable all year, but I still just feel like I can't get it out of my head that Gustafson's not better. And then yeah, Brossoit for the Jets. And then I've talked about it kind of a fair bit lately, and it's obviously easy to make the case after they score 10 goals, but I do think the Wild are going to continue to look better offensively. I think they had a lot more offensive upside than they showed kind of throughout like a hideous January. So I feel like they're probably still trending at the low end of their totals just based off like that sample of play. So yeah, I like the Wild and I like the over here. I think both those are really reasonable looks. And yeah,
Okay, before we get to best bets, we'll wrap up with the Predators and the Vegas Golden Knights. At the time of recording, Nashville is plus 122, Vegas minus 146, and the total here is currently sitting also at 5.5. A lot of 5.5s in the early going here. It's not something you see all that often in the modern NHL. I I want to talk about the Predators and the Sphere thing because I think it's kind of funny. Uh, their head coach, I guess the team had organized a trip to the Vegas Sphere during this road trip to go see U2, and head coach Andrew Brunette canceled it because the team was playing, and I quote, like they're looking forward to vacation, which was a funny thing to say about a team that and a league that just came back from an All-Star break. They responded with a win in their last game, but against the St. Louis Blues, and now they go to Vegas. But it's just been wobbly for the Predators of late. Didn't look all that great against the Devils in that 4-2 loss. Then they got absolutely trashed by the Stars in a 9-2 loss. They respond against a Blues team, but we think the Blues are pretty pedestrian. This one on the road in Vegas with all that baggage, I would need a bigger price on Nashville than this.
I'm kind of right at Nashville or pass here. I still think this kind of recent play is a little bit of like a low spell and like a larger sample of their play. I think they can make this tough for the Knights, and I think they can kind of go in there and compete. They've got subs. I feel like the avenues are there. I actually got on this early, hoping that Vegas would just think that the Preds were marginal enough that they could play Hill today. But they are going to play Hill tomorrow, so didn't quite work out on that front. But I'm just right there with the Preds. I don't mind them. These feel like the kind of spots too that teams recently have really been getting their chances versus the Knights, even as the um, roster has stabilized a little bit. They're still like the Knights are getting outchanced really consistently. In their last 10, they own the eighth worst expected goals rating. And I think it's looked like that. Like when I watch them right now, I can't think of many performances where I've been like, damn, Vegas played good that game. There really hasn't been many of those. It feels like the wins I've watched have been like, oh, okay, Aiden Hill was awesome tonight, and they finished a high percentage of their chances. I don't think there's been many where you were like they played a really complete game, right? Like I feel like the one that got a lot of attention was that Oilers win. But I also thought even that game, I mean, the Oilers hit two posts. They clearly owned more of the puck. Draisaitl missed an empty net, and Vegas was clinical at the right times and held on with some good goaltending. But I don't think that makes you worthy of this kind of a price tag. Maybe versus the Preds, I'm kind of close, but I still think that in a lot of these games, they are getting credit for their priors, their Stanley Cup, all of that good stuff. Which I mean, in time, I'm not worried about Vegas, but I think that when we're just talking about the dog days of the regular season for them, um, I don't think that there's much reason to expect them to turn it around too much, and that they're probably it's I think in the short term it's going to be profitable to keep fading against them. The other thing I'll throw out there too for the Knights as they kind of look to just tread water here, they're so locked into what they're in the division.
Yep.
Like they're not catching
Yeah.
the Canucks with what's in
Yep.
hand. It'd be nice to get home ice advantage in round one, but I don't think it's in the world. I don't think that it's like bulletin board material for them or that they really care. I think they're just kind of trying to, get there and try to ramp things up in the final month. So I'm not too high on them right now. It's not like a thing that I'm trying to say they're a bad team at all because it could, when the playoffs come around, if they ramp things up and they get Eichel back in the mix, could be a whole different look. But yeah, for now, I think I want to keep fading them.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I think we heard so much about this with Tampa and Toronto the past couple seasons, and uh, we're not hearing about it as much. But I mean, the Oilers are 15 points back of Vancouver, and I know they've got games in hand, and they're the Oilers, so maybe they can put some pressure on Vancouver. And the Knights are what, 12 points back? It's pretty clear what's going to end up happening in the Pacific Division bracket. So uh, I think that is a fair point, and one just to keep in mind when you're looking at teams like Vegas. Like you said, like that Oilers game kind of was like a preseason game in a way for that playoff series, and they'll get up for those ones. I'm sure they'll get up for games against the Canucks and other, but there will be some sleepy spots to look to go against this team. So I'm glad you brought that one up. All right, let's just kind of circle back on our best bets. For me, it's the Dallas Stars. Like I said, I think you'll be able to get a better number than what we're looking at right now, which is plus 115 ish. When Scott Wedgwood gets confirmed, Dallas is in New York to play the Rangers. I think that the Stars are like a tier or two above the Rangers. The Rangers are on this crazy 7 game winning streak, but they've caught a ton of breaks to get there. Their 5-on-5 play remains a bit lax or pedestrian. It just comes down to whether or not they can make up for it on power play and in goal. And I think against a team like the Stars, that becomes a much trickier proposition. What's your favorite bet?
My favorite bet is the over 6.5 in the Sens game. I feel like I've said that a lot the last couple of weeks, especially some of the Sens are playing every Tuesday and Thursday. But I can't see how there's 6.5s out there for this game. Florida's got one of the best offenses in the league. They play at a high pace too. Recently, like they defend extremely well, but they're getting as many chances as anyone in the league. They're right there with Edmonton in terms of expected goals for. So you talk about that kind of an offense playing an up tempo game versus the Sens. The Sens themselves, their offensive, like they're creating the seventh most chances over the last month in the league. And again, I think that makes sense. You look at the talent on the roster, ton of offensive firepower in the top nine. Really like what they're doing there. So I think both these teams want to play up tempo hockey. The analytics agree with that because they're both right at the top in terms of expected goals for. And the Senators' goaltending is trash. So there's any like there's always a chance that they could just have numerous softies go in and help us get there. So I like the over in this one. I also don't hate the bet on both teams to go over 2.5. I think that's always a solid look. It's out there at plus 160 at the time of recording, and I would go down to plus 140. I think that as good as the Panthers have defended recently, I still feel confident that the Sens can, on average, get theirs versus any side, even if they kind of let down versus the Blackhawks and the Ducks. And I also think there's kind of something to that because I think it's a different way that they go about like those teams want to play the Senators versus the way the Panthers want to play the
Right.
Senators. I don't think they're going to try to button it up or anything like that. So yeah, 6.5 for me on this game is just too low. And I don't know if it'll close at 7, but I think some of the numbers should hold because we'll see. There's a ton of the books are just been sitting right at 6.5 and minus 125 all day. So
All right. So that does it for this episode of Line Change. We'll be back for a busier than normal Wednesday slate. Tim will be back in the third chair. We think if you missed it, the underdogs at the top of the show. Nick liked the Vancouver Canucks against the Colorado Avalanche. I'm going to take a shot with the Columbus Blue Jackets in Los Angeles against the Kings. And then our best bets came in on the Dallas Stars for me against the New York Rangers. Nick is looking at the over 6.5 in Florida and Ottawa. Thank you again for listening. Please do rate, review, subscribe, um, all that good stuff. Don't hack Nick's PayPal anymore, please. And thank you to our producer Noah for all the hard work on the back end. And we'll see you on Wednesday.